carer at work, and Mr. Bijou Kurien, talking about the retail in the post-COVID world. I've heard almost 70% of the people are pausing, but very soon we have over 100 people. Thank you very much, dear sir.
Thank you, Simran, for that very energetic welcome. I know it's always difficult to be at the first session of a show like this. Thank you, Soma and Samit, for the invitation to address all of you all at the RJIF. I have a very long association with the jewelry industry, but over the last, must qualify it, saying that over the last 7 years, I have more of an association with the retail industry. So what I'm trying to do, and I know there's a whole bunch of jewelers out here, I know there are several sessions post mine which will reflect on the trends, the challenges, the opportunities in the jewelry industry. So what I'm trying to do is to kind of just blend a bit of what's happening in the world of retail, in the world of lifestyle, which jewelry is a part of, and some of the changes that are happening around us, more specifically, that we've witnessed in the last 18 months, and hopefully learn from all of that and try and figure out how do we run our businesses better. Let me first talk about our lives in the last 18 months, because that is something which is top of mind for a lot of people. It's top of mind when you speak to somebody who's studying, somebody who's working, somebody who's running a business, and everybody talks about the last 18 months and the changes that it's made to their lives. Rapid adoption of a digital lifestyle is probably the one phrase which can summarize all of the things that have happened to us in the last 18 months. We started off with work from home, and we never thought that we would have a situation where we would not go to a physical entity called an office to do work, or we would sit in our homes and actually run our businesses where the stores were closed and where the people were working from their homes. But yet, we all did that. Study from home. A lot of us who've got children who are studying in school, studying in college, what we realized is that they were all studying from home. And they were very comfortable also, not going through the chore of the getting up in the morning and then rushing early in the morning to get to a school, get into their classrooms. So while they miss their friends and some of the other associations that they have at school, they seemed more comfortable studying from home at the end of the day. So that's the second thing that happened. The third was that we also began to shop from home, except for the essential categories, which were, as many of you all would remember, in wave one, in last year's March end and April, where we used to scurry to the closest grocery store to buy essential products and then bring it back home. But once the online businesses opened up, then we became very comfortable actually running, ordering from our homes for the things that we wanted. Because we also realized at that stage that we were not geared for staying at home. For a lot of us who actually work, we figured out that we have a work life, so we go to an office, and then we have a home life when we come back from an office. But we never realized that we have a work-home life. So in terms of attire, we suddenly said that, oh God, what clothes do I wear in the house? Can I be in my night clothes? But I can't also be in my day clothes. So we had to find a kind of attire which would fit both the day and the night and allow us to work from our homes or study from our homes. So we ended up buying a lot of these things online, to the extent when I spoke to people in Jockey last year in July, they said that we ran out of innerwear. We ran out of loungewear. They ran out of athleisure, purely because of the tremendous increase in the demand for these products. Entertain ourselves at home. Theaters were closed, malls were closed, so we had to sit at home. But we yet managed to figure out that Netflix and Hotstar and Sony Live and every other streaming channel had the opportunity to entertain us, and not just a theater. So we all figured out that there were more ways to entertain than going into a theater. We also got fed up of cooking at home, and we got fed up of the fact that the maids couldn't come in to help us cook at home. And so we said, shall we start ordering out? And then we began to see Swiggies and Zomatos and several others like Dunzo, etc., really go through the roof in terms of, the kind of restaurant orders that they were taking from people who were fed up of eating at home. And of course, there were several such changes that we all experienced in the last 18 months. So how much will remain of the lifestyle that we enjoyed prior to March of 2020? And how much of what we have learned in the last 18 months remain with us into the future? For each one of us, in the situations in which we are, at the stage in life in which we are, the kind of vocation that we all enjoy, it will differ. But what we need to remember is that some of these have become habits. So today, if you ask a child, do you want to go back to school? They don't say enthusiastically yes. On the other hand, there are some parts of school that they miss. And they say that we'd like to go back to school for meeting our friends. We'd like to go back to school, for the opportunity to party, to understand what's happening, to meet people of the opposite gender, those kind of things. But do you want to go back to study? Maybe not. I think I'm studying as well as what I could, even if I'm not in school. If you ask an IT company employee, do you want to go back to work? It's a mixed opinion, and I sit on the board of a technology company. And when we did a survey with our employees as to, do you want to come back to work? Funnily enough, there were two segments which said that they actually wanted to come back to work. One were the youngsters, the singles. And they said that, we can't stay 2 and 3 to a room for so long. We can't be cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner for so long. We'd like to come back to work merely for the fact that we have breakfast, lunch, and the opportunity to have dinner out with our friends, for the opportunity to have the company internet rather than to share internet with our friends. So they wanted to come back. The other, surprisingly, were married women. And what they said is that, when we actually are at home, our roles today become cook, cleaner, teacher to my children, and also, my husband's working from home, so his coffees and teas and all his requirements. So I don't get my time when I'm at home. So I'd certainly like my time by coming back to office, because I think that's a great opportunity for me to get away from all of the humdrum that I'm otherwise, experiencing. So funnily, these two groups actually said, we'd like to go back to work. So I'm saying that some people, some of these things will stay, and it will become a part of second nature. It just takes you 6 weeks of not smoking to kick up the habit. It also takes you only 3 weeks of smoking to pick up a habit. So just remember, if you spend 18 months doing some things monotonously, repetitively, and as Simran said that we forgot to clap, then obviously some things will remain with us like that. So we should remember, we are all consumers. And as consumers, some of these will become more permanent in our behaviors. So what changes did we witness in the lifestyle industry? And if you look at the lifestyle industry and some of the changes that we witnessed, dressing down to dressing up. Earlier, we were used to dressing up. So we had to go out, we'd put on trousers, hopefully. We'd put on our shoes, and we'd go to work. But if you went to work in your home, you didn't even put on your trousers. In fact, you needn't even have changed from the shorts that you wore to sleep that night. All you needed was something on top which presented itself as decent, and you walked around in your casual slippers. So the entire emphasis on dressing down developed over a period of time, such that even now, when people go to work, they have difficulty in dressing up, because for so long, they've actually been dressing down. And that's very reflected when you look at what people are selling in the apparel industry. Formal shirts, down. Casual clothing, up. Jeans, surprisingly, stayed steady right through the last 18 months. loungewear up, bridal wear, mixed variety, high-end bridal wear, slightly down, but the regular maneuver kind of bridal wear, all of that went up. Why? Because it suffered 6 months of no sale, and then from October last year, when weddings came up in bunches, then a lot of people started buying bridal wear. So what you can see is that the lifestyles we lead are reflected in the clothes we buy. So if you ask somebody, why has sale of lipsticks come down? They'll say it's work from home. What's the connection? Nobody wears lipsticks if you're working from home. On the other hand, if you go to the Middle East and ask them, what would you buy? All of them say, we buy eye makeup. Why? Because that's the only thing on their face that you can actually see. So, you know, what you do see culturally and from a behavioral standpoint, the reflection in terms of business will be, and product categories will be reflected in the lifestyles that we lead. The other is in terms of the fact that you were not spending several things. You know, you couldn't go to a restaurant, you couldn't spend, you couldn't go to see a movie in the mall, in the theater in the mall, because you weren't spending. And what happened is that a lot of people who had steady incomes, you know, not the people who got affected because of COVID, but a lot of people who had steady incomes actually ended up saving a lot more. Some of that got translated in terms of hard purchases. So, for example, the company which owns the hotel, which is in the real estate business, found a huge surge in residential apartments. Why? Because a lot of people who were suddenly stuck together at home realized that 3 bedrooms is not enough. I need 3 bedrooms and a study. I need a 4th bedroom. I need a larger apartment. So there was a lot of upgrading in terms of the kind of accommodation. So it had some implications in terms of what unwittingly went up in terms of business, but what remained constant in terms of business. Spending in goods rather than services. Services were closed. Services are high touch. So if you want to go to a spa, it's high touch. You want to go to a restaurant, it's high touch. So all of the services businesses, which are typically the experience businesses, which are high touch, where there is great interaction between individuals, and because of social distancing requirements, those were closed longer than the sale of products. So what you saw in 18 months is that product sales actually remained reasonably steady, except for a few categories which got badly affected, like apparel, for example. Whereas on the other hand, the services businesses actually dived. And then, of course, there were things like, say, travel, domestic travel. International travel certainly was a no-no. Even domestic travel with restrictions happened. So you would have a hotel like this actually running at 25% occupancy, but you could have a resort in Coorg running at 80% occupancy. And that was the difference. So every city, whether it is Lonavala, Kandala for Bombay, or whether it was Coorg and Kabini and surrounding resort locations for Bangalore, every city saw the mushrooming of businesses in terms of domestic tourism in the resort towns surrounding it. So those were some of the things which peculiarly none of us would have actually predicted. Home nesting improvements. And when I talk about home nesting, you know, when you put a man in a kitchen for 6 weeks, especially at the time when domestic help was not allowed into apartment complexes, then they will discover the inadequacies of a kitchen. So initially, for example, dishwashers had a long waiting list because men said that, why are we sitting and scrubbing and washing dishes? Why don't we buy a dishwasher? There was improvement in the kind of appliances that they were buying for their homes. So you could see that some of the consumer durable companies, especially those which were in the brown goods, supplying appliances, you know, marketing and supplying appliances, all of them ran through a shortage situation between July and September of last year. So what you can see is that, you know, home nesting, furniture in the house, the fact that when you have many people studying and working from home, you don't really have enough study tables, you know, led to a run on study tables. So there were several things that got improved in terms of, you know, home improvements. That is what you call as home nesting. Virtual healthcare. A lot of people were concerned about their health, saying that what happens to me in case something, I must protect myself, I must protect my family. So forget the masks and forget the sanitizers. How do I ensure that we build up our immunity? So looking at things like yoga, looking at things like nutrients, supplements, those kind of products, talking to doctors online rather than taking the risk of going to a hospital or to a clinic. These were some changes that happened in terms of lifestyle. Emphasis on sustainability. And this is, mark my words, an important thing that we are beginning to see. The younger consumer especially is suddenly becoming a lot more conscious on saying that, are we wasting too much? Are we making sure that we are leaving a sustainable footprint? Are we making sure that the kind of activities that we lead, the kind of lifestyles that we lead, is this something that the earth can sustain? And those are things that are now coming in and becoming more and more important in the way consumers are choosing brands. Surge in domestic tourism, as I mentioned to you earlier, is another thing that we began to see last year. Increased consumption of digital media. So when you sit at home and we're looking at a screen, then you feel more comfortable in terms of, and you only got, let's say, streaming video, then you see that, why should I sample news like the way I've always consumed it in the past? Why do I need a newspaper? Why can't I read news online? And then when you read news online, then you realize that your traditional advertising is not getting to the consumer. So then you begin to think of digital advertising. And then you say, okay, what should I do in terms of digital advertising? So increased consumption of digital media had an implication also in the way you were spending money in terms of advertising. The increased contribution, as you mentioned earlier, of the e-commerce channel. And that is purely because people couldn't go into stores and buy, and they suddenly discovered. So two things happened. At a very macro level, you anyway had an increase in the number of people connected to the internet. So what used to be 300, 400 million suddenly shot up to about 600 million people connected to the internet. You also had about 75 million online shoppers. Suddenly the 75 million online shoppers went to about 150 million online shoppers. You had certain age groups which were very loath to shop online, which were the greater than 35s. But you suddenly discovered a lot of them, and including the older people, the greater than 60s, began getting comfortable with shopping online because they realized that's the only way in which they can get all their daily necessities. So you then started gaining a whole bunch of new customer segments who earlier weren't really online shoppers. And many more such things which happened as far as the lifestyle industry goes. And if you look at the jewelry industry, which is also part of the lifestyle industry, you can see changes there. Worldwide, if you were to look at it, there was a drop in terms of sale. And to some extent, the drop was because of, one, physical stores being closed, A. The second is that international travel was, reduced. And a lot of jewelry shopping happens during duty-free buying and also during international travel. So what did happen was that those two segments got affected a lot more than domestic retail. And overall, if you looked at it, there was a drop of about 15 to 20% last year. But what you did see, and especially across the jewelry industry and even in India, you began to see this slight difference in the way the national brands performed last year versus the local brands. And you could see that some of the national brands were beginning to pull away and gain a lot more than local brands in the jewelry industry. Why is that? Is it the fact that consumers are beginning to trust brands more often at a time of crisis? Is it because they feel that, at this time, I am not sure, I can't go out, but if the only place I had a chance of going to one location, I'd prefer to go to a place which is nationally renowned, something which is trustworthy, not that the others are not, but something that they perceived as being trustworthy. So this was, also evident in terms of performance. Confidence increasing in brands, and this is again reinforcing the same thing which I mentioned earlier. So, the whole brand play is becoming a lot stronger in the jewelry industry. Whether you're a D2C brand, whether you're a store brand, whether you're a retail brand, but the fact remains that no longer is the package of benefits going to be from me as owner, this as product, this as price. But that has to now get elevated to a level where it is store as brand, product as brand, and consistency in terms of service as being part of the branded offering. We also saw in the jewelry industry a swift adoption of digital. And digital, first because of the communication, as we discussed earlier, where people are actually looking at digital media all the time, then obviously you've got to do digital advertising. The second that we noticed in terms of jewelry marketing was in the amount of the digital quotient in store operations. And some of the more progressive retailers started doing that last year pretty early because they realized my store is closed, but I've got merchandise in the store. How do I ensure that my digital catalog can be communicated to my customer who's sitting in their homes? And they all found very innovative ways of being able to communicate it. Some of them went to the extreme, and you might call yourself e-commerce, but everybody in the standard Indian Jugaad style managed to actually communicate, this product is available in my store. If you want to buy, these are the things that you can buy. So digital in-store operations and channels of sale also was something that each one of us as jewelers embraced to some extent last year, some a lot more than the others. The sustainability agenda came to the fore. And when consumers start questioning sustainability, then you've got to understand, what does that mean? Can I buy gold as paper as opposed to gold physically? Should I buy lab-grown diamonds as opposed to buying naturally mined diamonds? Now, these are questions that consumers are asking. And when you have to answer them, you can't say that it is only because of value. You have to be able to give them a reason which goes beyond just value. Because you have to now address that the product is not bought just merely for value, but the product is also bought for reasons such as sustainability, trust, transparency, fairness, a lot of other factors which are there. And those are beginning to start occupying a larger role in the way a consumer is actually choosing what he or she wants to buy. And in that context, we have to really look at this. So don't think of lab-grown diamonds as just merely being a substitute for natural diamonds in terms of prices. Think of it more holistically and understand, is it got a larger opportunity, or do we have a great opportunity with natural diamonds to be able to spin the same story on sustainability, on fairness, on truth, transparency, all of those aspects. So these are some things. And in the context of all of this, if you look at the changing role of retail, what are some of the things that have happened? And the first thing that has happened is that the role of the store has been questioned today. People are asking me, if I can sit in my home and buy, why do I need a store? The first question. And they say that, if today my technology allows me to be able to see all the things which are there in the store, and which tells me that this is the price. And if you have a service which offers me, try, if it doesn't fit you, if you don't like it, return it at no cost, then why do you want me to, pain myself by coming to a store? So you've got to remember now that the store has to play a different role than merely selling. Because if it is merely there to sell, merely there to display, then those things can be done more conveniently today than physically somebody coming into a store. So we sometimes kid ourselves saying that there is a touch and feel. But now, because of COVID, people are afraid of touch and feel. So you've got to understand, how do we, kind of make sure that we architect what the store is to offer in the context of the new needs of consumers and the alternative ways that consumers can actually shop. Integration of digital efforts across all our businesses. At every single touch point, whenever we think of digital merely in terms of saying that how do I make sure my catalog is digital? How do I make sure that I communicate digitally to the consumer? How do I showcase my entire inventory digitally to the consumer? And that's all that we think of. But just remember, it also has to extend in terms of how do I design digitally? How do I buy digitally? How do I decide what is keep in my store digitally? How do I craft my assortment basis the understanding that I have of the consumer, which also is gained digitally? So, all of this stuff has to really come into play. How do I ensure that when the customer walks in, I can actually showcase out of my 3,000 SKUs, the most relevant SKUs to them, because they want to spare time, and you also want to spare time. So don't pain them by showing everything that is irrelevant to them. So there are several ways in which you have to figure out how to use digital technologies to be able to improve your operations, and not merely in terms of selling products. Increasing use of data analytics and AI. And this is something that is coming across, especially in many of the horizontal e-commerce plays, because they have realized that consumers are asking for a lot more products. So every single visit of the consumer to, let's say, for example, somebody like an Amazon, they know exactly who it is as a consumer. They know what you bought in the past. They know what you've looked at in the past. They know how much time you've spent looking at different products in the past. They've known the categories that you've actually shortlisted. All this before you actually, made a shopping cart. And this is stuff that the consumer does within our stores. They come, they look at different products, they spend time with different products. They look at a tray, they put on certain products on the tray. They try certain products, they finally buy something. What they buy, you've got through your POS. But what they've done before that, you don't have at all in a POS. And unfortunately, when it comes to the e-commerce world, they have everything that they've done before the purchase in their system. So the next time you come in there, they are more intelligent about the customer than you are. And they're able to actually showcase to the customers what exactly the customer will be finding most relevant. So this is something that we have to remember. How do we use the data about our customers? Because if we have, let's say, a 30-40% conversion ratio, which means that out of every 10, 3 buy or 4 buy, 6 don't buy. And if 6 don't buy, what is it that they have done before they walked out? Do we have that knowledge? How do we make sure that more of that 6 buy the next time they come back to the store? That's kind of stuff that we have to start building in. The role of the sales associates in the store, and they play a very, very critical role in this aspect, in terms of being able to capture customer intelligence in a manner which is relevant. The role of the products in the store. How do we track products in a store? You can track cursor movements online, but how do we track customer movements in a store? What products did they see? In the apparel business, for example, they have RFID tags. So in some cases, what they try and do, and especially some of the more progressive apparel brands, are able to figure out which are the clothes which were taken to the fitting room. And they make out from the clothes taken to the fitting room saying that these are the first line of preference of the customer. Which are the clothes which have been taken off a shelf or a hanger, even when the customer tries it on themselves. Because they understand that those are ones which are more preferred, because they have to be able to figure out how to replenish quickly. So that's the kind of intelligence we have to try and build into the role of products in store. Transparency and trust, as I mentioned to you earlier, is a very critical element for customers. And today, a lot of brands are being chosen because of that reason. So how do you make sure that you're able to actually talk about it? The quotient about these two aspects. Impact on the community and the environment. Sustainability is very critical, and that is something that we have to remember. Digital media, as I mentioned to you, is getting increasingly popular. Social conversations and peer group are things that are getting very, very important. So consumers are actually making choices, not by asking other people, by reading what other people are saying about the same company or the product. So that's another area that we have to make sure we keep important. So what will be demanded from all of us? Our ability to think strategically and to adapt quickly. Lots of changes are happening, but we have to be able to think ahead and figure out how to quickly adopt those things. We have to be able to execute rapidly. It cannot be thoughts. It has to be executed as fast as possible. We have to be able to drive the change, and we have to change the organization to be able to keep continuously repurposing ourselves as the market and as the consumers change. We have to be able to create business models which are resilient. If there are situations such as COVID, we can sit and cry about it, or we have to figure out how to be able to create a robust business model, a resilient business model, which can adapt to all of these risks which are there. To be as tech savvy as you are business savvy. We've always believed that we need to know product. We need to know technology in addition to knowing product today, because it plays a very, very important role. We have to be able to build organizations organically. But on the other hand, we have to remember there are many things that others do which we can't do. How do we collaborate with them to be able to improve our own organizational capabilities? So the next decade, mark my words, a lot of us who are able to understand this will be the ones who are going to be able to succeed in the future. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for that patient hearing.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rishikesh Trivedi of Suntech Global Business Solutions was supposed to speak on tech-enabled retail, making technology the driver to build a customer-centric approach. But last night,